everyone. Welcome to another mini lecture for performance management. And today what I'm going to be talking to you about are the different dimensions of job performance. So far in this module, we have talked about what performance is and how we define it. We've also talked about determinants of job performance. So what factors predict whether or not somebody is likely to perform. And now what we're going to dive into are the different ways that we can characterize job performance. So as we mentioned earlier in the module, job performance is multidimensional, which means we need to pay attention to different sets of behaviors and outcomes in order to fully capture the full spectrum of performance. So there are 4 dimensions. You've seen this slide before in the module, and this is where actually the module leaves off. So thought this provides a nice transition point. So the first dimension is task performance, which is concerned with how well an employee carries out the task of his or her job. So here we're looking at just basic job duties or job responsibilities. The second is contextual performance, and these are behaviors that improve the work environment but are not formally required. So oftentimes we might call contextual performance sort of the going the extra mile. Here, these are things that individuals do that we can't mandate them to do, but certainly make the work environment a better place to be. The third dimension is adaptive performance, and this involves the ability to change one's thinking or behavior, so the ability to maybe learn new skills or new procedures or processes as they're required either by a situation or by a changing overall culture protocol in an organization. And the fourth type of dimension is counterproductive performance. And so this is undesirable performance that can harm the organization. So behaviors that employees engage in which detract from organizational goals and performance and certainly can have an effect on the employee themselves and their performance. So as you can see by these dimensions of job performance, not all behaviors are positive. So when we're trying to define or assess job performance, it's essential that we take into account the things that employees do that positively help the organization, as well as things that employees do that might detract from the organization. So we're going to go into each of these slides or each of these dimensions in more detail on the slides that follow. So that first dimension is task performance. And again, this involves the primary tasks or behaviors associated with a job. So essentially with task performance, what we're looking at is an employee's ability to transform inputs and turn them into outputs, whether that's an actual product or an actual or a service that they might provide. But more or less, we're looking at what they're doing during that transformation. So what kind of tasks are they engaging in that allow them to take in organizational resources or goods and turn them into some output that is desirable for the organization or for other stakeholders and customers. So kind of at their core, task performance involves behaviors that are listed in an employee's job description and that they perform in order to get paid. So here, if you look up any job description, it lists kind of the essential things that are required of an employee that are necessary in order to complete that job. So that is task performance. So basically, whatever it is that the employee is getting paid to do would be categorized as task performance. So as you might remember, we talked about determinants of job performance and different factors that predict whether or not someone is likely to do well in their job. And so when we're trying to assess task performance and whether or not somebody is likely to perform well, we would be best served by looking at knowledge, abilities, and skills. Because here, an individual who doesn't have the ability to do their primary tasks literally aren't able to do the tasks, are not going to be performing well. Also, if they lack the knowledge, if they lack the skills that are required to do their job, then they're also not going to be able to perform well no matter how hard they try, because knowledge, ability, and skills are essential to really doing the core work that's required of a given job. The second dimension of job performance is contextual performance. And again, these are behaviors that contribute to the organization's effectiveness by providing a good environment in which the task can occur. So, more or less, these are things that an individual will do that kind of go above and beyond, that help make the workplace an enjoyable place to be, or that improve functioning among other employees. So, largely, contextual performance and someone's ability to go above and beyond, to go the extra mile, to do things that aren't formally required of them, are largely driven by personality. So, here we might consider traits like conscientiousness or agreeableness being quite predictive of those who are likely to engage in contextual performance behaviors. On this slide, we're going to talk about different examples of contextual performance. So, in a textbook, they call it contextual performance, but you might also hear it called organizational citizenship behaviors. So, this is a terminology that's also used in the field of management and organizational psychology. So, there are different types of citizenship behaviors or contextual performance behaviors, and some examples are helping behavior. So here, when an individual voluntarily helps other people with work-related problems or trying to prevent problems, so an individual who's willing to take on a workload of a coworker or step in for them if they're unable to be at work, that would be an indication of helping behavior. Sportsmanship involves kind of maintaining a positive attitude and really going through your day-to-day work environment and work experiences without complaining. I'm sure you can all think of someone that you've worked with who literally complains about everything, and what a drain it can be on the overall organizational culture, or even just on productivity when someone's constantly identifying things that are wrong and constantly finding a way to sort of talk badly about leadership or badly about the organization. I mean, it really is demotivating. So when we have individuals that show up and have a positive attitude and not only do the work, but do it with a smile and without complaint, it definitely makes an improvement to the work environment and can aid in building a stronger, more positive organizational culture. The third type of citizenship behavior is organizational loyalty. And this involves an individual endorsing, supporting, and defending organizational objectives. So even when threatening times exist, these individuals are committed to the organization, and that's really important. In the context of WVU, the pandemic's been really helpful in highlighting some of these different behaviors. So you can look back at the different policies that the organization put in place during the COVID-19 pandemic related to social distancing, related to wearing masks, and other types of behaviors that we all had to engage in order to keep ourselves and our community safe. And so whether or not somebody liked any of these changes, a good citizen endorsed them, they supported them, and they enacted these changes to get through the pandemic to support one another. So whether or not they wanted to mask, they did. Whether or not they wanted to social distance, they did, because it was in support of the organization, which they care about. And we can certainly consider the pandemic threatening times for most organizations in society, including WVU. Another type of citizenship behavior is called organizational compliance, and this involves just regularly obeying rules and regulations, even when no one is watching. And that part's really important because oftentimes work is completed when employees are not being monitored. So yes, we have management, and yes, they see some behaviors that are occurring, but in most jobs, employees have some level of autonomy where they're able to complete their work without significant oversight. And so what we really desire are employees who are going to follow the rules even when no one is watching. And so these types of employees, again, help uphold our policies, our procedures, and really help to maintain the integrity of the organization. Individual initiative is that going above and beyond, so where a person might seek new ways to complete work, or they might take on extra work, really trying to be proactive. These are always the employees that we love to have in our organization and that we want to continue to foster and develop, because there is a tendency for people to come in and just do their job and go home. But when you have somebody who's really willing to look at what the organization needs and to go above and beyond, to do the extra mile, they're really star individuals that we don't want to lose. And the last type of OCB is called civic virtue. And this involves participating in organizational events and just being part of the organizational community. So if there's a potluck event, these individuals show up. If there's a volunteering day, these individuals show up. So they come to events and they really support the organizational community regardless of if it's required or not. Here in the management department, we have different speaker series throughout the semester, particularly for our PhD students, where we might bring in organizational scholars who present on their research. These are not required for faculty to attend, but it's very common in our department for the whole department to show up, to show support for these speakers, and really just to have a strong culture. And so here we would see very high rates of civic virtue behaviors among our faculty because individuals are willing to come to things even when it's not explicitly stated in the job description or work requirements because they want to be part of the community. The third dimension of job performance is called adaptive performance, and this involves reacting to and anticipating changes in the work context. So, as you know, the nature of work is always changing. Again, I think the pandemic really highlighted the necessity of adaptive performance. Organizations that were able to pivot during the pandemic were able to thrive and to continue to succeed. But organizations that were not able to pivot floundered. And I think there were a lot of closing of organizations that really weren't able to change their business operations or their marketing or weren't able to deliver their goods or services to their clients because of the pandemic. So different types of situations or factors that would require adaptive performance might be emergencies or crises. So can somebody react when an emergency arises to continue to get the job done or to engage in tasks that will address the emergency? So for instance, if you have ever worked at a restaurant, perhaps you've had a customer that is choking. Employees who have high adaptive performance might just stop what they're doing, jump in and give the Heimlich maneuver to somebody. So being able to be calm and collected in that situation to step in and handle an emergency or crisis. Periods of work stress. So all industries tend to have work periods that are higher or might experience times of years that are more stressful or require more effort. And so some individuals are going to be more likely to react to and adjust to those changes than others. For instance, if you've ever worked in retail and had to work during Black Friday or during the holiday season, there are certainly days that require more effort, differences in how you get the work done, being able to help more people and work quicker. Some individuals are able to handle that where others are not as able to handle that. Creative problem solving, so when a problem arises, what can we do to fix it? Uncertain situations. So sometimes situations arise that we have no training for or that we're not expecting, but employees still need to rise to the occasion to get the job done or to handle those situations. Oftentimes, organizations change the way tasks are administered, the technologies that are used. So if a new technology is implemented, a new tracking system, a new type of software, can an employee adapt to that, or do they prefer to do things the old way and push and fight back against the change? There's also interpersonal adaptability, and so this is the ability to work with other individuals who might be different than ourselves in terms of different working styles or pacing. For instance, I work with a colleague who works overnight. So a lot of the work that he does is, at midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, which is definitely not my working style. I tend to work more during the daytime. And it's really helpful for the two of us together because I can work in the daytime, send it to him, he can work at nighttime and send it back. So for us, there's actually a synergy in doing this. But for some individuals, they're not able to work with people who have different approaches or styles, and it can end up bogging things down. They're just not able to go from team to team with colleagues who have different approaches. And similarly, cultural adaptability means working with other individuals from different cultures who might have different practices or beliefs or values than we have, and being able to adapt our work to that. So, for instance, in France, there's a policy that employees are not required to respond to work tasks outside of their working hours. So if you work 9 to 5, after 5 p.m., it's actually illegal for somebody to assign you work to do. Here in the United States, that's definitely not how we approach work, and it tends to be more of a you work all the time around the clock whenever you're needed approach. And that can lead to some conflicts amongst employees, because if you're working on a team with somebody who's from a different culture, they might have a different approach to work, and we might perceive them as being lazy or not a team player, but really that is the cultural values that they have, and it might explain why they perform in a certain way. So if we're going to be good performers and we're going to be adaptive performers, we also need to be able to change or adapt, be flexible to the other cultures of individuals with whom we're working. And also physical adaptability. So are we able to adjust the types of tasks that we engage in? Are we able to change the ways in which we move our bodies in order to do tasks? So adaptive performance is going to be predicted mainly by ability and personality. So there are definitely going to be some ability factors here that are going to determine whether or not somebody is even able to adapt, but then also personality. So individuals that have uncertainty avoidance, right? They don't like to be in uncertain situations. Individuals that are low in openness to experience are generally going to be less likely to show adaptive performance versus individuals that are highly open to change, that are comfortable with uncertainty. They're more likely to rise to the occasion when these situations come up. And the fourth dimension is called counterproductive work performance. And here, these are undesirable performance actions that harm the organization and its employees and customers. Importantly here, counterproductive performance is defined as intentional behavior that an employee engages in. So if you make a mistake and end up wasting a bunch of work material, that wouldn't be considered counterproductive if it was an honest mistake or accident. Here we're talking about things that employees do intentionally that really work against the organization's goals. There are different types of counterproductive performance. And again, different terminology here. You might have heard the term CWBs, which stands for counterproductive work behaviors, or CWBs for short, because that is a whole lot to say. So CWBs can actually be differentiated based on individual and organizational. So when we're talking about individual CWBs, these are acts or behaviors that are directed toward other individuals. So things like inappropriate verbal actions, saying things that are unkind, using slurs, maybe telling, sexist jokes, things like that. They can also involve inappropriate physical actions. So here you might think about sexual harassment, inappropriate touching, violence, or threatening somebody, punching them, etc. Those would all be certainly inappropriate physical actions. We can also include alcohol or drug use at work. So somebody who shows up under the influence, or maybe they're showing up hungover, certainly detracts from their ability to do the job, but also can put other people at risk. And then we can just look at general unsafe behavior. So maybe somebody who fails to wear safety gear, maybe someone who fails to wash their hands when it's required. Think of if you worked in an operating room and the surgeon never washed their hands. You might not want to be working in that operating room with that person. Someone who might not follow protocols if they're driving on the road, if you're, a delivery driver and you drive too fast, or you don't wear your seatbelt, all of those can endanger other individuals. Or the person themselves. You can also include seeking revenge on colleagues as well. So some individuals might feel as though they've been mistreated or wronged, and so as a result, they attempt to take revenge on those individuals and harm them in some way. Employees can also engage in deviance toward organizations, and so these are actions that an employee takes that hurt the organization, specifically things like theft, so stealing from the organization, destroying property, not showing up to work, right? That certainly hurts the organization and its goals. Working slowly or carelessly, so working much slower than you're able to, or not paying attention to the details, being very sloppy in your work because you just simply don't care, that certainly hurts the organization. And as well as covering up mistakes. So if a mistake is made, rather than owning it or trying to draw attention to fix it, just letting it go and hoping that nobody notices it certainly can have an effect on the organization in the long term. So, again, counterproductive work behaviors are things that we don't want our employees to do. I think very often when we talk about performance, we tend to focus on the good things that we want people to do and all the positive ways that they're contributing to the organization. But we need this full spectrum. We need to be holistic in our approach. And that's why we also consider these counterproductive behaviors as part of performance, because it lets us know when an individual is engaging in an action or behavior that hurts the organization. And it is quite possible for somebody to be a good task performer and also engage in citizenship or in counterproductive work behaviors. So they might be checking the boxes on things that they're required to do while also maybe engaging in sexual harassment or theft or things like that. So we can't just focus on that task behavior because we might be missing a significant component of their overall job performance.